Hello, my name is Lindsay. You could say I'm one of those pioneers in urban explorations, although no one ever really gave me credit for that. My YouTube channel was always specialized in horror stuff, and at the time, I was pretty well known. But after what I experienced that night, I decided to delete my channel and be forgotten forever. My story began at the height of urban legends and creepypastas. At that time, all you could see of horror on YouTube were gameplays of popular content creators playing games like Amnesia or Slender Man. I was never good at games, but I loved horror, and I was ready to go further. I started doing urban exploration. I had already gone to some cemeteries with friends when I was younger, but I had never done anything like this for YouTube, although I didn't think it would be much different. There were already some other YouTubers. I can't say I was the first one to do it, but I realized that this was something new and that sooner or later I would explode and I would be one of the first. I started with some cemeteries and abandoned places. My audience, who were used to me uploading crime investigation videos, reacted very well and wanted more content. Soon after, I upped the ante and started looking for ghosts more aggressively, like playing Ouija or summoning the ghost of Bloody Mary. But none of that worked. Until I decided to film myself playing the elevator game. To play the elevator game, I had to follow a set of rules. But if part of the challenge I would do, I could only see the rules on the spot. To start the game, I went to a luxurious hotel with more than 10 elevators, as this was the condition to be able to play the game. I put a camera in my shirt pocket so I could capture whatever happened, even though I knew nothing would happen for sure. I started by taking the elevator to the second floor. Then I pushed the button for the fourth floor, and from there, I went back to the second floor. Following the rules, I went to the sixth floor, back to the second floor, and from there, I went to the 10th floor. From that floor, I went back to floor 5. I was about to see the rules again, but on that floor, something strange happened. A very strange-looking woman got on the elevator with me. The woman was very tall. Her face was elongated and deformed. Possibly, she had some kind of disease. Her clothes looked old-fashioned as if they were from several years ago. But what struck me the most about her were her eyes. They were red. Was she wearing contact lenses? Before I could see the rules again, the elevator started moving again, and she went up to the 10th floor. Even though I had filmed all this time, the game was ruined by the strange woman getting on the elevator, as I couldn't keep going from one floor to another with another person next to me. Besides, this woman was really very strange and gave me a bad feeling. With her on camera, I'm sure I'd have good content for YouTube by now. I was getting off the elevator, but to my surprise, the woman spoke to me. "Where are you going?" "What do you mean? My room is on this floor." As soon as I told that lie, something surprised me. The elevator doors closed by themselves with me inside. Without anyone touching it, the elevator started to go down to the second floor. The woman didn't answer me. She just stared at me in a terrifying and intimidating way. To avoid the awkward silence, I grabbed my cell phone and looked at the rules, just to make the time pass faster. When I saw the rules, I froze. The rules said that on the 5th floor, a woman I had to ignore would get on the elevator, and on the 10th floor, she would ask me where I was going. The rule said, whatever it took, I had to ignore her. I swear, I can't tell you the horror I felt in my whole body. It was as if a current of fear and pain ran through me from head to toe. As I read the rules, I could feel this woman's gaze scanning me up and down. I could hear a giggling coming from behind me. We both knew we hadn't followed the rules. The laughter was getting louder and louder, but immediately I began to feel something very strange. The laughter wasn't coming from behind me anymore. It was coming from my own head. The laughter sounded louder and louder and louder and louder from inside my head. The elevator reached the first floor, and when the doors opened, I escaped as fast as I could. The pain in my head was too strong, and the voice kept ringing and never seemed to stop. Dizzy and full of pain, I fell to the floor, and suddenly I felt something pull my leg with enormous violence. It was the woman from the elevator. When I could see her, Something in her had changed. She no longer had eyes, nose, ears, or anything. She only had a huge mouth that covered her whole face. The woman dragged me back into the elevator with enormous violence, and when she had me there, she did nothing. The silence was absolute. It was as if she had left. Only she didn't, because I could hear her breathing behind me. That's not all. From her mouth, I could feel hot saliva dripping down the back of my neck. The woman was behind me, but she chose not to attack me. This was not a wild animal. This was a thinking being. Very sadistic thinking being. The elevator doors closed with me inside, and it began to rise. As it did, I could feel the woman's breath behind me, closer and closer to my neck. All I could do was tear up and hope that someone would find my camera. Hope that no one else would make this mistake that I made and not tempt unknown forces. When the woman was behind me, the elevator arrived at its destination. I listened as the woman opened her mouth. She was about to die. So I closed my eyes and cried harder than ever. "Are you all right, young lady?" When I opened my eyes, there was a man behind me. This was a normal man, and he was looking at me in a confused manner. I turned around, and the woman was gone. The man must have asked for the elevator and broken up the game. This man unknowingly saved my life. When I contacted the police, they looked at the tape of the hotel, but there was nothing. According to it, I was alone all this time, but there was one thing, that the face I could detect. In it, you can see somehow, someone invisible grabbed my feet, proving that something weird had really happened. Do you want to know another curious thing? Once I took the camera out of my shirt, I noticed that it was empty. I had never recorded anything, although I was sure I had initiated the recording. As much as I investigated, I discovered that this woman was surely from another dimension, and I had called her while playing the elevator game. Possibly, that was the reason no camera could detect her. A few days later, I deleted all my ideas from YouTube, and although they say that the files are always left on the internet, I must admit that this worked for me. Eventually, people stopped talking about me, and years later, everyone had already forgotten about me. It cost me a lot to do this, but if anyone had seen the leaked hotel videos or heard my story, they would have gone to try to do the same thing. If you are listening to this story, don't play the elevator game for nothing. The only reason I am telling you this is to let you know that what I experienced is real. And if you don't follow my warning, you may end up in another dimension, and to be honest, you won't be welcomed. Hey, my name is Helen, and I have a question for you. Do you believe in the paranormal? Do you believe that there are unexplained things? Things beyond our understanding? Or do you believe that, given enough time, you could understand the origin of anything? I used to be one of those people. Those people who don't believe in anything. But after that night in the elevator, that night when I received the strange call, I was forced to believe. It all started on a Saturday. That day, my grandmother had called me on the phone, but since I was taking a bath, I couldn't answer it. I received the missed call and immediately called her, but no one answered. I didn't really expect a call from her since we had a very bad relationship. I don't know why I would do it, but I always felt like she hated me. I never did anything but treat her well, but she seemed to have her disdain for me. She never looked at me and always avoided any contact with me. And when we were alone, she would hit me. Once I grew up, I stopped talking to her and cut off any kind of relationship with her. So you can imagine that receiving a call like that seemed very strange to me. Worried, I called my mom to let her know. She told me she had missed a call as well. My mom lived really far away, so I had no way to see my grandmother. So she told me to go check on her and make sure everything was okay. I really didn't like having to see my grandmother. Since I'm an adult, she treats me with a little more respect, but I still feel like she hates me, since she doesn't do much to hide it. Anyway, I knew I had to go. I was doing this for my mother, not for her. Unwillingly but willingly, I put on a jacket and went to take the elevator of the apartment where I lived. There were people taking it on another floor, so I took the stairs. I started to go down the stairs, but in the middle of my distraction, something happened. Suddenly, my cell phone rang, and to my surprise, I almost fell down the stairs. Angry, I got up and grabbed my cell phone from the floor. I hate the stairs. Next time, I'll take the elevator. When I picked up the phone, I breathed a sigh of relief. It was my grandmother. I answered it, thinking that with this call, I would see what she wanted, and I wouldn't have to go to her house. But when I picked it up, I was very worried. On the other end of the phone, no one was talking to me. All I heard was agitated, even violent breathing. It was as if the person on the other end was choking. I tried to call 911, but for some reason, the phone wouldn't hang up. I tried to turn it off, but I couldn't either. The call was still active, and on the other end, I heard a lady breathing. That was definitely my grandmother. I sent a message to my mom telling her to call the ambulance and ran to her house, hoping to save her if something was happening to her. Luckily, she lived a few blocks away, so the drive was quick. During the ride, I tried to call her several times, but nothing. I could only hear her breathing getting more and more intense. I couldn't hear anyone else with her. She must have had an accident. When I was about to enter her house, something stopped me. I started to feel a very strong pain all over my head. It was a familiar pain, but intense. I fell to the floor, kneeling in pain, not knowing what to do, but I couldn't stop. I stood up and went into her apartment with the spare keys I had at home. As I entered her apartment, I quickly asked for the elevator, which was luckily nearby. She lived on the 10th floor, so there was no way she could climb the stairs. Grasping my head in pain, I got on the elevator and pushed the button to go to the floor where my grandmother lived. But halfway up, the elevator stopped and the lights went out. After a few seconds, other lights came on again. They were red and somewhat broken emergency lights. I took up my cell phone to send a picture to my mother, telling her to let her know I was trapped. To make matters worse, my head hurt more than ever. When I activated the phone, I noticed that the call was still active, and my breathing was louder than ever. Activating the camera, I was about to take the picture, but something interrupted me. The camera was pointing to the floor, and I saw feet that were not mine. I ran the camera, and where those feet were, there was no one. As I put the camera back on, I felt the pain in my head get worse and worse. As a reflex action, I lifted the camera up, and there she was. It was my grandmother. My grandmother was pale, breathing violently as she squeezed my head violently. Now I remember that pain. That's the pain I felt when I was a child. My grandmother used to squeeze my head with her fingers when we were alone. Just like when I was a child, I couldn't free myself. The pain was too strong. I felt as helpless as when I was a child. As she hurt me, I could hear her dark breaths. It was exactly the same as the one I heard on the phone. At that moment, I realized that the noise on the phone was not coming from my grandmother's room. It was coming from next door to me. All this time, my grandmother's spirit was next to me, mistreating me. Was I going crazy? This couldn't be real. My grandmother squeezed harder and harder. I was losing consciousness, and I felt like I was going to break my skull. Amidst all the pain and desperation, I dropped the phone, which crashed to the floor and broke. Immediately after doing so, the light returned to the elevator, which continued on its way. My grandmother was no longer there. Terrified and disbelieving what had happened, I walked to my grandmother's house. Surely she was fine. Nothing that had happened made sense. This couldn't be real. As I entered her house, a deep smell of the dead invaded my nose. The police arrived at the same time I did, and upon seeing me, they recognized the smell and immediately pulled me out. They knew there was a dead body in that room. Soon after, my grandmother was confirmed dead. She had taken her own life in a ritual. From what the cops saw, the place was full of satanic drawings, and my grandmother had not died that day, but the corpse had been there for several days. During the investigation, they discovered that my grandmother was in a cult. There were also several pictures of me with black candles around them. As soon as they told me that, I remembered that the phone that broke that day was a gift from my grandmother. It was the only gift she gave me in her life, and she had done it with a big smile. Since that day, I only go down or up the stairs to my apartment. I could never take an elevator again.
As a hotel receptionist, I get to meet a lot of people. For the most part, it's an easy job. Unlike being into room service or the kitchen, a receptionist's job is straightforward. However, that does not mean we do not deal with our fair share of crazy customers. However, the story I'm about to tell you was the most bizarre and horrifying thing that had ever happened on my shift. So the hotel I work at is a 5-star hotel, including its own restaurant and whatnot. But it's also said to be the most haunted hotel in town. Now, being a receptionist, I have never experienced anything remotely paranormal in this place until this incident. Many of the staff members, especially the room service people, claim to have experienced a few things. Nothing major or life-threatening, but they have heard footsteps, felt like someone is watching them. They have heard weird noises and stuff like that. But now, most of the staff is desensitized to these things. We just do our job and move on. The hotel had 7 floors and a big rooftop to host events. The 4th floor had suites just like most of the other floors. Our hotel has 2 big elevators that go right from the basement to the rooftop. The staff as well as customers use these elevators. Each elevator has a CCTV camera in it that records who uses the lift at all times. One evening, I got a call from suite number 606. "Hello, you have reached the reception. How may I help you?" I asked. "The water from the shower is brownish. Why is it that way? Can you do something about it?" This was the first time someone had made that complaint. Surely there must be something malfunctioning. "Don't worry, ma'am. Please tell me your room number and I will ask someone to take a look." I hung up with her call and then asked a staff member to take a look. They checked the plumbing, and there was no issue with it. Everything seemed fine. No rust or leaks or breaks in the pipe for dirt to get into the water. So, similar complaints started flooding in. Many guests living in different suites were complaining about the bad water quality in the bathroom. Now, you must know hotels this big spend a good portion of their revenue each year on water purification and filtering. So this was a very unlikely scenario. When the plumbers could not detect the source of the brown water, they decided to do a more extensive search. Instead of checking the pipes, they decided to check in the big water tanks that hold the water. These tanks were situated in a secluded area on the rooftop, which is locked at all times. A few staff members accompanied these plumbers to the rooftops, and they began checking the outside of the tank first. When they found nothing out of the ordinary, they called, having decided to open the water tank, which is locked. The moment they opened the tank, the plumber who was going to check it from inside screamed and fell from the ladder he had used to get to the top of the tank. The rest of the people with him were confused. Soon the cops were called, and all the guests staying in the hotel were either moved to another hotel or asked not to use the shower and the bathroom at all. Exactly 4 days before this incident on January 22nd, 2020, Maria Lee had checked in for 4 days. I was the one who checked her in. Like most receptionists, I do not remember the name or faces of all the people who check in or check out, but I remember checking in Maria, just because she was the only Asian woman in the lobby that evening. Maria was very friendly, and it was her first time staying in our hotel. She was staying there alone and was expecting no company for the duration of her stay. She seemed like any normal guest you see living in a hotel. Whenever any of our guests experience something slightly weird, or should I say paranormal, their first reaction is to either call reception or try to find a staff member as soon as possible. So when Maria's swollen dead body was found floating face first in the big water tank on the roof, there were a lot of questions in the minds of the authorities as well as the staff members. As there were no calls made from her room to the reception, neither had any staff member seen her going towards the rooftop. Everyone was wondering how she got there. More so, when the tank was locked at all times, except while conducting regular maintenance. The reason for the brown water was her dead body, which was leaking bodily fluids into the water in the tank. But discovering her dead body wasn't the scariest part. The scariest part was the things that were revealed during the investigation. Initially, all of the staff members, including me, were called in for questioning who had worked in the hotel during Maria's stay there. When the cops found no leads, they decided to check all the CCTV cameras in the hotel. Not much was found on the CCTV camera installed in the corridors or the main lobby, but the CCTV in the elevator had some solid footage. Many staff members had complained for ages that the elevator was probably the most haunted part of the hotel. In the CCTV footage, you could clearly see Maria entering the elevator on the 4th floor. She looks visibly scared and a lot shifty. She's in her pajamas and her hair open and barefoot. This was odd. When she got in the elevator, unlike normal people who press the floor they want to go to, Maria kept staring at the buttons for a few seconds. Then she pressed the button to the 7th floor. Suddenly, as the door to the elevator was about to close, she hid behind a metal panel, as if someone was after her. She was terrified, judging by the expression on her face. When the elevator doors closed completely, she started staring at her own reflection in the mirror. Suddenly, she crouched down in one corner, as if she had seen something terrifying in the mirror. When the elevator reached the 7th floor, as soon as the doors opened, she ran out of the elevator. She was captured by the CCTV cameras on the 7th floor, but that was the last time she was recorded. No camera had recorded her going to the rooftop, let alone the water tank. And then, her dead body was found. The forensics predicted that Maria died on the 23rd, which means a day after her arrival. To date, the case is open, and no one knows how Maria died, or what she was scared of and running away from. And the worst part was, how did she get into the locked water tank on the rooftop? Not even the best detectives were able to solve the case. However, some staff members who have worked in the hotel for over a decade say that this was done by the spirits that haunt the hotel. On the one hand, I personally do not believe anyone who says the evil spirits did it. But, on the other hand, there is no logical explanation as to how she might have died. Every day I work in this hotel, I keep wondering, what must have happened to Maria Lee?